He arrived home earlier than usual, expecting the familiar smell of dinner and the soft hum of television. Instead, he heard voices floating from the dining room, sharp and deliberate, like judges determining a sentence. He paused in the hallway, unsure whether he misheard. His name came up again, spoken without affection or hesitation. His wife sat at the head of the table, and her mother occupied the chair beside her, leaning forward as if preparing a final evaluation. They were not discussing plans or family matters. They were dissecting him. He approached quietly, unnoticed, and every word struck him harder than the next. His wife described his salary as something shameful. She compared his efforts to the failures of men who ended up forgotten. She claimed she had outgrown him and no longer wished to remain tied to someone who would never provide the lifestyle she deserved. Her mother nodded, satisfied with each statement, encouraging her daughter to leave before losing more time on a man lacking ambition. He stood still, absorbing every syllable. The woman he once believed to be his closest ally spoke of him like a stranger who had wandered into her life by mistake. He did not hear concern. He heard contempt. The realization arrived slowly, like the last drop of rain before a storm ends. This was not an argument fueled by frustration. This was a declaration. She was announcing her choice to abandon the marriage, not because of betrayal or abuse, but because she no longer respected the man she married. Her mother raised a glass in agreement, saying her daughter should move on and find a partner who reflected her aspirations. His wife laughed a little, a bitter sound that lacked joy. She described his career as insignificant and predicted that he would spend the rest of his life trying to catch up to men who reached their success years earlier. He waited for guilt to appear in her voice. It never came. He expected hesitation, perhaps regret. Instead, he saw a woman certain that his value had expired. She spoke as if he were an obstacle in her story, not a partner. His presence seemed irrelevant to her performance. The more he listened, the more something inside him shifted. He had always assumed love survived hardship, as long as two people shared commitment and support. He discovered in that moment that love can drown quietly under the weight of judgment. A marriage can endure disagreements. It cannot survive humiliation. His heart felt strangely still, not broken, but awakening. He realized he had spent years trying to be enough for someone who measured worth with the precision of a calculator, never once considering the effort it took to stand beside her dreams. He stepped forward, and the floor creaked beneath his feet. They turned, startled by his sudden presence. His wife opened her mouth, searching for an explanation that did not exist. Her mother straightened in her chair, ready to defend her daughter. He looked at both of them calmly. The room, with its expensive decor and carefully arranged plates, felt unfamiliar. He understood that his house was no longer a home. It was a showroom of expectations he could never satisfy. His wife tried to speak, but he raised his hand gently, not to silence her, but to acknowledge that he had heard enough. There was no anger in his eyes. Anger would have meant he still expected something from her. What he felt instead was clarity. A quiet certainty settled inside him. He was not losing a partner. He was witnessing the unveiling of a truth he should have seen long before. Respect had left the marriage, and where respect ends, love becomes a memory dressed in illusions. He remained standing for a moment after his wife and her mother fell silent, allowing the weight of their words to settle like settling dust after a collapse. The room was filled with the kind of tension that reveals truths people can no longer hide. His wife searched his face, expecting signs of wounded pride or desperate pleading. Her mother adjusted her posture, preparing for an argument she believed she was destined to win. He slowly pulled out a chair and sat down, not as a defeated husband seeking validation, but as a man who finally understood the landscape of the relationship he had been fighting to preserve. His calm unsettled them, because calmness after an emotional attack does not signify surrender. It signifies comprehension. His wife repeated some of her complaints with less confidence this time, as if trying to reignite the indignation that justified her earlier speech. She spoke of the lifestyle she deserved, the friends she envied, the vacations she dreamed of. Her mother added comments about how her daughter had suffered long enough with a partner who refused to rise to her expectations. He listened without interrupting, without defending himself, without displaying emotion. When they finished, he did something neither of them expected. He agreed. He agreed he was not the man they wanted. He agreed that his income did not meet their standards. He agreed that if they believed life would be better without him, then he would not stand in their way. His agreement was not compliance. It was a revelation. His wife blinked, unsure how to interpret his response. She had spent months preparing arguments, anticipating resistance, imagining dramatic scenes that would make her appear strong. Instead, she encountered a man who no longer wished to fight for a place where he was not valued. Her mother frowned, confused by his acceptance. She had come ready for dominance. She was now forced into silence by a man who refused to engage on her terms. He remained composed, and in that composure, the dynamic of power shifted. They had always relied on his reactions to feel superior. Without reaction, superiority became meaningless. He leaned back in his chair and calmly asked if there was anything else they wished to add. His tone was polite, almost detached, but behind it was a message neither woman could ignore. By agreeing with them, he removed the battleground they expected to conquer. His wife looked at her mother as if searching for guidance, but no guidance came. The mother who once dictated every move suddenly appeared lost. Confidence evaporates when it is not challenged, for it thrives only in the face of resistance. He forced them to face the essence of their complaints without the fuel of his defensiveness. He stood up slowly and informed them that if they believed leaving was the answer, he would not interfere. His wife took a small step backward, startled by the ease with which he released her. She had imagined tears, apologies, and desperate attempts to keep her. Instead, she was given freedom without a price. It frightened her more than any confrontation would have. Freedom feels light when imagined, but it becomes heavy when handed over without demand. He walked toward the hallway with the calm of a man who had recovered something far more valuable than pride. He had recovered clarity. As he left the room, neither woman called his name. They remained seated, processing the implications of his response. His acceptance revealed a truth they were not prepared to confront. They had built their arguments on the belief that he needed them more than they needed him. The moment he stopped resisting, the foundation of their certainty cracked. He had not defended his worth. He had simply refused to let them decide it. He woke the next morning with a mind clearer than it had felt in years. There was no weight on his chest, no confusion, no lingering desire to repair something already beyond repair. He dressed with deliberate calm and left the house before either woman awoke. The streets were quiet, and the air carried the freshness of a beginning he had not planned, but now fully accepted. He walked into a modest law firm he had passed countless times without paying attention. Today, he entered with purpose. The receptionist greeted him, and within minutes, he was seated across from an attorney whose experience showed not in framed certificates, but in the confident stillness of his posture. He explained the situation without theatrics. The lawyer listened attentively, occasionally nodding, occasionally taking notes. When he finished, he expected routine legal advice, perhaps guidance on divorce procedures or financial rights. Instead, the lawyer leaned forward and asked a simple question. Did he know that his signature held more power in the marriage than he realized? He frowned, uncertain what that meant. The lawyer pulled out a copy of a contract he recognized instantly. It was the document his wife had insisted he sign months earlier when she invested in a property she claimed was part of her new business. He had not questioned her insistence at the time. He signed it to support her dream, unaware that hidden within the pages was a clause connecting her financial stability directly to his approval. He reread the section the lawyer highlighted. If he withdrew his support, the property she bragged about so proudly could not be sold, refinanced, or transferred without his consent. The mortgage also relied on joint approval for any major decision. His wife believed she had built a kingdom independent of him, but her castle stood on land he legally controlled. The lawyer explained calmly that while her words wounded his pride, her ignorance placed her plans at his mercy. He felt no satisfaction, only a quiet realization of the irony. The woman who declared his salary pathetic had tied her ambitions to the man she thought beneath her. The lawyer continued, revealing additional layers. The business she acclaimed as her personal triumph had been registered in both their names for tax advantages. Her mother, who spoke so confidently the previous evening, had invested nothing. Every decision she pushed her daughter to make now required his participation. He sat still, absorbing this information. He did not smile, but something shifted inside him. For the first time, he understood the strength he possessed, not through revenge or manipulation, but through the simple documentation of choices made during a time when he believed marriage meant unity. The lawyer asked what he intended to do. He did not respond immediately. His silence was not indecision, but calculation. He realized he did not need to fight, nor did he need dramatic gestures. All he had to do was stop supporting what no longer aligned with his values. The lawyer respected his quiet resolve and offered further guidance should he need it. He shook the lawyer's hand and left the office with the same calm that had unsettled his wife and her mother. Outside, the sun shone brighter than when he entered. He walked slowly, not because he was tired, but because he understood that knowledge is a heavier weapon than anger. His wife had believed she was freeing herself from a burden. She had not realized she was severing the branch she stood on. He now held the truth she never imagined he would seek, and the truth did not make him vengeful. It simply made him ready. His wife called him that afternoon and invited him to dinner. Her voice tried to sound composed, yet something in her tone carried hesitation. She proposed meeting at a restaurant they once visited during happier years. He accepted without questioning her intentions. He arrived on time, dressed simply, while she appeared in clothes chosen to reassert confidence. The table was set elegantly, candles lit, menus unopened. She smiled with a nervousness she attempted to disguise. He sat quietly, observing the scene as if attending a performance whose ending he already knew. She began speaking before the waiter arrived. She mentioned opportunities she hoped to pursue, acquaintances who inspired her, and a life she believed was waiting for her once she detached from limitations. She presented herself as a woman entering a new chapter. He listened without interruption. Her words floated above the table like decorations at an event celebrating her anticipated independence. Then she brought out a folder, sliding it toward him with a practiced gesture. She explained it contained preliminary divorce terms that reflected her fairness and generosity. He opened the folder calmly. He reviewed each page with the patience of someone studying instructions for a machine he already understood. She watched him closely, expecting a reaction. She spoke about emotional exhaustion, financial goals, and the desire for a lifestyle beyond what he could offer. Her reasoning, once delivered with confidence, now trembled beneath the weight of expectation. When he reached the end of the document, he asked if she wished for him to sign immediately. She nodded, relieved that he appeared compliant. The waiter placed plates on the table, yet neither of them touched the food. He reached into his bag and placed a second folder beside hers. Unlike hers, this one contained documents prepared by the lawyer he had visited earlier. She raised her eyebrows, unsure whether to open it. He encouraged her to read. She hesitated before flipping to the first page. Her confident posture slowly dissolved. Page after page contradicted her assumptions. The property she believed she owned independently required his consent for any financial movement. The business she claimed as her own existed legally as a shared enterprise. Her plans depended on signatures she no longer controlled. The dinner was no longer a negotiation. It was a revelation. Her lips parted, but no words emerged. For the first time since their marriage began to crumble, her silence did not express victory. It expressed discovery. He informed her calmly that he was not here to stop her from leaving. He simply wanted her to understand the reality she had overlooked. Her mother had encouraged rebellion without knowledge of the legal terrain. The independence she boasted about was built on agreements she had never read. The lifestyle she dreamed of required cooperation she could not force. The waiter returned to refill their glasses. Neither of them acknowledged him. His wife stared at the documents as if seeing her reflection for the first time. She asked what he planned to do. He answered that her choices would determine the future, not his pride. She swallowed hard, realizing she had entered a game she did not fully understand. He stood up, thanked her for the dinner invitation, and placed both folders on her side of the table. He walked toward the exit without turning back. She remained seated, surrounded by untouched food, cold candlelight, and papers that dismantled her certainty. The restaurant music played softly, yet every note felt like a reminder of her miscalculation. She had expected a man willing to fight for her approval. Instead, she encountered a man who had outgrown the need for validation. The evening she planned to celebrate her liberation became the night she discovered the limits of her control. The following evening, her mother arrived at the house with the confidence of someone expecting a spectacle. She believed she would witness his collapse, a man begging to be forgiven, a husband scrambling to defend his relevance. She removed her coat and entered the living room as if she owned the space, her smile sharpened by anticipation. His wife sat beside her, clutching a folder filled with the documents he had shown her at the restaurant. Her fingers trembled each time she touched it, as though the papers were made of ice. She expected him to appear panicked or uncertain. Instead, he walked into the room with the relaxed posture of someone who had already made peace with the truth. He greeted them politely and took his seat without hurry. The mother glanced at her daughter, urging her silently to begin. The daughter hesitated, then opened the folder and tried to speak. Her voice cracked on the first sentence. She reread the contract, hoping it had changed overnight, but the same lines remained. Her mother leaned forward, snatched the papers from her hands, and examined them as if her authority could alter legal reality. She scanned the clauses, growing paler with each paragraph. The property she believed her daughter owned required his approval to be sold or refinanced. The business that was supposed to symbolize independence was legally tied to his identity. Their imagined victory evaporated in the dim light of verifiable facts. Her mother tried to regain control by questioning the legitimacy of the documents. He remained silent, letting the weight of their signatures answer for him. Silence can feel like a wall, and his silence was built from bricks of certainty. He did not defend himself. He did not point out their miscalculations. He simply existed in a manner that made their judgments collapse under their own weight. His wife attempted to argue that intentions mattered more than signatures, but her voice faded as she heard how hollow it sounded. Her mother's expressions shifted from superiority to confusion and finally to unease. The silence became unbearable. The mother began speaking faster, piling words on top of one another, desperate to find an escape from the reality that confronted her. She accused him of manipulation, yet the documents proved she had encouraged her daughter's decisions without understanding their consequences. She expected emotion to break him. She did not expect a calm presence that exposed her ignorance. He spoke only once, asking a simple question. Had either of them read what they signed? The room froze. That question did not demand an answer. It revealed the answer they had avoided. His silence revealed something uncomfortable. They did not want equality. They wanted dominance. They believed he would always need to justify his place in their narrative. Now, the narrative was slipping away, and they had no vocabulary to reclaim it. His wife stared at her mother, realizing for the first time that confidence without knowledge is performance, not power. The mother folded the documents slowly, her hands losing the rigidity they once held. She came expecting triumph. She encountered accountability. He stood, thanked them for their time, and left the room without further comment. He did not slam the door. He did not raise his voice. He walked away with the quiet dignity of someone who has nothing to prove. His silence became a mirror, reflecting their behavior more accurately than any argument could. His wife remained seated, her pride unraveling thread by thread. She saw her reflection not as a victorious woman seeking her freedom, but as someone who had misunderstood the currency of respect. She wanted control. She forgot that control without knowledge leads only to humiliation. News spreads without permission. Within weeks, small details of their situation began circulating among friends, colleagues, and neighbors. No one knew the entire story, but fragments traveled fast. People who once admired her assertiveness sensed something had shifted. They noticed she no longer spoke with the same confidence at gatherings. Her comments about her husband's limitations sounded less like truth and more like echoes of a narrative that no longer held weight. Every time she tried to recount her grievances, someone mentioned how composed he seemed lately or how well his recent projects were going. Conversations that once centered around her aspirations now drifted toward his transformation. He appeared at social events without fanfare. He greeted everyone politely, listened more than he spoke, and answered questions with a clarity that unsettled those who had dismissed him previously. He did not brag about new partnerships or opportunities. His demeanor suggested a man who had stopped seeking permission to exist. Sometimes, silence can feel louder than achievement, and his silence carried the authority of someone who finally understood his worth. Friends who had barely noticed him before now approached him with curiosity, eager to learn about his ventures. People began asking him for advice. He never positioned himself as an expert, yet his insights had depth. He had spent years observing from the shadows, absorbing patterns, and now he spoke as someone who had seen the world without illusions. When others shared obstacles, he responded with solutions that made them reconsider their assumptions. It was no longer his income people measured. It was his perspective. A subtle admiration replaced the casual disregard he once endured, and admiration, once ignited, spreads faster than criticism. Meanwhile, his wife watched this unfolding with growing discomfort. For years, she had relied on social validation to confirm her place above him. She enjoyed being the center of attention, admired for her confidence and ambition. Yet now, people engaged with her differently. When she tried to steer conversations back to herself, they shifted back to him. Someone would mention his recent collaboration, another would comment on his patience, and someone else would admire how calm he seemed. Her opinions no longer shaped the room. Her presence did not command the same gravity it once had. She was still visible, but no longer influential. At one dinner party, she attempted to mock his modest past, hoping to regain laughter at his expense. The room fell silent. A friend responded that financial beginnings do not define a person's destination. Another remarked that character matters more than status. Each comment chipped away at the certainty she once held. She smiled awkwardly, realizing the audience she counted on now measured success differently than she did. Social value had moved, and she was not standing where it landed. The mother, who once encouraged her daughter to chase a life beyond him, noticed the same shift. People who used to agree with her judgment now avoided endorsing her criticism. They spoke well of him instead. The mother attempted to reassert her narrative, but her voice no longer carried authority. Respect cannot be reclaimed with explanations once it has been lost to evidence. The more they tried to belittle him, the more foolish they appeared. He never sought revenge. He did not orchestrate these changes. People simply recalibrated their perceptions based on what they witnessed. In a society where reputation functions like gravity, momentum does not remain neutral. Once it shifted, everything around him followed. He walked into rooms with the ease of someone who no longer needed acceptance. Those who once overlooked him now rearranged their positions whenever he spoke. He had not changed the world. The world had changed how it saw him. The transformation in his demeanor did not go unnoticed. One afternoon, while he reviewed documents in a quiet cafe, a man approached him with a hesitant smile. It was a former colleague, someone who once overlooked him during company meetings because he seemed too reserved to matter. The colleague sat down and explained that he had been observing his recent progress. He confessed that he always suspected he had untapped potential, but never saw him in an environment where it could flourish. He then shared information about a growing venture that required exactly the skills he possessed. The proposal was simple: join the project, contribute ideas, and become part of something that had the potential to reshape an entire industry. He did not respond impulsively. He asked questions, reviewed projections, and studied market trends. The more he learned, the more he realized this opportunity aligned perfectly with the knowledge he had gathered over years of solitude. He agreed to participate, not out of desperation, but out of recognition. For the first time, he was joining something because he wanted to, not because he needed someone else's approval. The decision marked the beginning of a new chapter. The work demanded long hours, complex decisions, and strategic thinking. He immersed himself in it with a dedication that surprised even him. Without constant criticism waiting at home, without someone measuring his worth based on external displays, he discovered how much energy had been wasted defending himself. Now, every thought and every plan translated into progress. His confidence grew quietly, like a seed finally receiving sunlight. Within months, his contributions became indispensable. He became known as the man who solved problems others did not even recognize. Investors began to take notice, and partnerships formed naturally around his ideas. His income increased steadily, not as a symbol of power, but as a reflection of competence. Money did not change him. It simply revealed who he had always been beneath layers of doubt imposed by others. His wife, meanwhile, observed these developments with disbelief. She had assumed he lacked ambition, that he would remain confined to a modest routine forever. She once bragged about leaving a man who held her back. Now she struggled to understand how the same man she dismissed had become someone other people admired. She began hearing comments about his progress at gatherings she attended. Friends who once nodded at her complaints now responded with surprise when she mentioned him. They praised his accomplishments and questioned her decision to distance herself from him. Her confidence, once supported by the judgment of others, began to fracture. She realized that she never opposed his dreams. She simply could not imagine him growing beyond her expectations. Her problem was not his salary. It was her inability to see value beyond appearances. She did not want a partner who contributed quietly. She wanted someone whose success would make her look superior. She did not understand that true strength does not announce itself. It reveals itself when it no longer needs validation. He continued his work without speaking about it. He no longer shared details with her or sought encouragement. Success flourished in silence. His composure made others curious, and curiosity made doors open. His destiny had shifted the moment his reputation did. The world he once tried to impress now came to him. His rise did not embarrass her. It exposed her. She realized she never judged him for who he was. She judged him for who she believed he would never become. The change in her behavior began subtly, almost imperceptible to anyone who was not paying attention. She no longer spoke with the cold certainty that once fueled her decisions. Her messages, once filled with demands and accusations, now arrived with questions disguised as concern. She asked about his meetings, his projects, his newfound partnerships. She called at unexpected hours with soft greetings, as if trying to enter his life through a door she once slammed shut. He read her messages without replying, not out of spite, but because silence had become his language, a language she could finally understand. Her curiosity grew with every unanswered attempt. She noticed his absence at places where she once counted on his presence. She saw people discussing him with admiration in spaces where she used to dominate conversations. At a social event, someone mentioned his recent work, describing him as a man whose confidence had matured into leadership. She smiled politely, but her chest tightened. Each compliment given to him felt like another thread pulling apart the narrative she had created about his limitations. She tried to join in these discussions, hoping to appear supportive. Yet every sentence she spoke betrayed her confusion. His rise was not supposed to happen without her. Her mother, who once encouraged her decisions, now looked irritated each time his name resurfaced. She asked questions about the project he was involved in, her tone sharp with suspicion. The mother wanted to understand how a man they had dismissed so casually managed to become someone other people respected. Her daughter could not answer. She pretended she still held control, but every unanswered text, every unreturned call, chipped away at the confidence she once displayed so freely. One evening, she attempted something bold. She visited his office under the pretense of congratulating him. She expected a warm welcome, perhaps a nostalgic conversation, maybe even gratitude. Instead, she found a man surrounded by colleagues who valued his insight. His desk held documents she did not recognize. His presence commanded attention she never believed he could inspire. She felt like an uninvited guest at a celebration she did not understand. He greeted her politely, yet without the familiarity she once took for granted. She tried to speak about their past, hoping to awaken old emotions. He listened with calm detachment, as though she were a visitor explaining a story that no longer belonged to him. His restraint unsettled her. She searched his face for frustration or longing. She found neither. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that while she once controlled his emotions, she no longer influenced his direction. She left the building with a tight smile, but inside, panic grew. He had become someone she could not predict, and unpredictability frightened her. She imagined returning to the marriage on her terms, yet every passing day showed her that the door she assumed remained open was closing without her permission. At home, she replayed memories of arguments she once believed proved her dominance. Those same memories now revealed her miscalculations. She looked at photographs taken during happier times and saw something she had missed. He had always been present, loyal, persistent. She had not left a weak man. She had abandoned a man whose strength had not yet been revealed. Her fear did not come from his success. It came from the realization that she misread him entirely. She tried again to reach him, this time with messages wrapped in nostalgia. He read them, then placed his phone aside. He felt no anger. He felt distance, and distance made room for clarity. She had treated his worth as negotiable. Now she watched it become a currency no longer available to her. Her message arrived late in the evening, short and uncertain, asking if they could meet one last time. There was no hostility in her words, only hesitation. He agreed to see her, not out of hope, but out of curiosity. He wanted to understand what she believed remained unresolved. They met in a quiet cafe, far from familiar faces. She arrived before him and sat near the window, her posture tense, her fingers twisting the edge of a napkin. The woman who once spoke with unshakable certainty now looked unsure of her own intentions. When he entered, she stood quickly and forced a smile that did not reach her eyes. They sat across from each other, and for a moment, silence filled the space like an invisible barrier. She was the first to speak, her voice softer than he remembered. She did not question his decisions or criticize his choices. Instead, she asked how he was doing. He answered politely, offering nothing more than basic details. She nodded, trying to find comfort in his calmness, but he did not offer any expression that suggested they shared the same past. She began confessing thoughts she had never admitted before. She said she felt overwhelmed by expectations, guided by advice that no longer seemed wise. She explained that she never truly intended to hurt him, yet every justification she formed sounded like a description of excuses rather than truth. He listened without reacting. He realized she was not apologizing for her choices. She was attempting to rearrange the story so she would not feel like the villain. Her voice trembled when she mentioned the people who now praised him. She confessed that she felt as though life had moved without her. She spoke of sleepless nights and moments when she wondered how everything changed so quickly. Her words carried longing, not for him, but for the certainty she once believed she owned. She wanted to reclaim the comfort she discarded without understanding its value. He asked her a single question. What exactly did she want from him now? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, the truth surfaced. She did not want partnership. She wanted assurance. She did not want reconciliation. She wanted shelter from consequences. She believed he would offer her the same stability she once dismissed, now repackaged as a new beginning. She spoke of a future filled with promises she never honored in the past. He listened with steady composure. He remembered nights when he shared dreams she ignored, decisions she mocked, efforts she minimized. He recalled how every attempt to grow was met with criticism rather than encouragement. Now she asked for the benefits of a journey she refused to participate in. He saw clearly that she wanted security without loyalty, success without support, status without sacrifice. Her tone pleaded for a chapter she had no intention of writing with him. When he finally spoke, his words were gentle but unshakable. He thanked her for the years they spent together. He acknowledged that their relationship had taught him more about himself than he ever expected. Then he told her something she did not anticipate. He no longer carried resentment. He simply no longer carried the relationship. He explained that a partnership cannot survive on entitlement. It requires respect, and respect had left long before either of them realized it. Her eyes filled with tears, not because of what he said, but because of what he did not offer. He did not give her hope. He did not give her a chance to renegotiate the past. He gave her closure. She reached out, but he did not move toward her. He stood slowly, wished her peace, and walked away, leaving her seated with the remnants of choices she could no longer reverse. The day of the signing arrived without fanfare. The air held no trace of tension, only an unfamiliar quiet that felt like the sound of a chapter reaching its natural end. He walked into the lawyer's office with measured steps, carrying no bitterness, no second thoughts, only the certainty that the decision had already been made long before ink touched paper. His wife was already seated, dressed impeccably, as if appearances could still control the outcome of a story she no longer directed. She expected hesitation. She expected questions. She expected one last attempt to win her back. Instead, she watched him sit across from her as though he were taking a seat in a room that did not belong to either of them anymore. The lawyer placed the documents on the table and explained the terms, though both of them knew there was nothing left to negotiate. She tried to speak, hoping her voice might soften the reality she helped create. She mentioned memories, not out of affection, but as bargaining chips. He listened politely, but her words no longer reached the place in him they once occupied. Nostalgia requires respect to remain alive, and respect had left long ago. He picked up the pen, glanced at the space where his signature belonged, and signed with a steady hand. The sound of the pen scratching the paper echoed louder in her mind than any argument they ever had. Her expression changed. She waited for him to look at her, to show regret, to reveal that he still cared enough to be wounded. He offered none of that. She stared at the signature, realizing that the divorce was not a consequence of conflict, but a consequence of clarity. She thought the absence of him would humiliate him. She thought losing her would break him. She did not consider the possibility that she was releasing a man who had finally learned that leaving is sometimes the only way to protect dignity. He stood up and thanked the lawyer. His voice held no triumph, only peace. She tried to form a question, something that would justify her choices, but every word felt meaningless. It was the first time she understood that she was not losing a man who failed to meet her expectations. She was losing a man who had outgrown her judgment. She watched him walk away, realizing too late that the divorce was not her victory. It was his escape. Outside the office, the sky looked different. The streets seemed cleaner, the world quieter, as if the air itself acknowledged his release. He felt no desire to celebrate. Freedom does not require noise. It breathes in silence. Each step he took felt lighter, as though he had removed a burden he once mistook for responsibility. He did not hurry. He allowed himself to feel the absence of weight, the absence of a narrative that demanded he constantly prove himself worthy. Back inside the office, she remained seated, staring at the papers that now defined her future. She touched his signature, realizing it represented more than the end of a marriage. It represented the moment she understood that she had misjudged him. She did not lose a paycheck. She lost a presence. She did not lose comfort. She lost character. The silence around her was no longer intimidating. It was revealing. She saw her reflection in the polished table and recognized someone who traded loyalty for illusion. He walked away, not as a man defeated by circumstance, but as a man liberated by truth. A marriage built on conditions had ended, and the signature she once demanded became the signature that freed him. He woke the next morning to a silence that felt different from the silence he once endured. It was no longer heavy. It was spacious. There was no tension waiting to explode, no expectations waiting to be met, no voice measuring his worth. He sat by the window with a cup of coffee and noticed something he had not seen in years. His reflection looked calm. Not proud, not triumphant, just calm. He packed a suitcase, not because he wanted to escape, but because he finally had somewhere to go that did not require permission to exist. His journey began quietly. He traveled to places he once admired only in pictures, cities where no one knew his past or judged his choices. He attended conferences, listened to mentors, and observed people who had built their success on resilience rather than appearances. He took notes, asked questions, and absorbed knowledge with the hunger of someone who finally understood that learning is not a burden. It is a privilege. Every new environment revealed a version of himself he had ignored. He realized that ambition grows best in spaces where it is not ridiculed. His investments began modestly. He placed money into ventures others overlooked, guided not by luck, but by the insights he had cultivated during the years he spent listening while others underestimated him. Each decision led to another. Each partnership reinforced his reputation as someone who delivered results without noise. The world that once doubted him now approached him with curiosity. People no longer asked about his salary. They asked about his vision. His presence carried weight, not because he demanded respect, but because he no longer needed validation to feel worthy. Meanwhile, his former wife faced a different path. Gossip did not attack her. Reality did. She learned that admiration built on comparison collapses once the comparison disappears. She tried to reclaim the certainty she once enjoyed, yet every new conversation reminded her of the man she dismissed. People spoke of his growth with genuine respect, and each word became a mirror she struggled to face. She discovered that society does not admire those who leave. It admires those who rise without bitterness. She once measured success by what others could see. He measured it by what he could become. He built a life not defined by revenge or resentment. He built a life defined by choice. He bought a home that felt like a sanctuary, a space filled with books, plans, and quiet victories. He hosted gatherings where ideas were shared rather than egos displayed. Guests left inspired, often remarking that they had never seen someone so grounded. His success was not loud. It was consistent. He did not chase applause. Applause found him. One afternoon, while reviewing a new project, he received a message from someone who once believed his value ended at his paycheck. She did not ask for reconciliation. She asked how he managed to become the man she never saw. He read the message and smiled. Growth does not require explanations. It requires silence. He closed his phone and returned to his work. He understood something most people learn too late. Wealth is not measured by numbers. Wealth is measured by options. He chose peace over approval, clarity over confusion, freedom over validation. He did not become wealthy because she left. He became wealthy because he stopped tying his identity to someone who confused love with possession. Life did not reward him for winning. Life rewarded him for walking away. His story did not end with a door closing. It ended with another one opening. Not every ending is a punishment. Some endings are promotions, given to those who finally recognize their own value and refuse to stay where respect no longer lives.